welcome to Boulevard's Big Three, where we get to talk about this week's sermon with questions from you and me, Mike, and our special guest. We are in week 2 of the Upside Down movement. This has already been such a great series.
Yes, it has. Let's say hello to our guest this morning, Blake Lawson.
Hello.
Blake, introduce yourself. Tell everybody about your family, what you do, how long you've been here at North Boulevard, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, so my name is Blake Lawson. I'm married to Corey. I have 2 sons, and one is 4 and one is 1. Our youngest is at home today dealing with molars, so we're praying that those can come through very quickly. We've been at Boulevard for 2019, so like 12 years ago, feels like. And so we've been here for a bit, but we definitely found
parents with a toddler math
during
right there.
COVID, right?
Yeah, and COVID.
So,
that's different.
yeah, we've been here for what seems like forever, but we're just very thankful that we're here.
And what do you do for a job?
I am a home inspector, and I own a home inspection company as well. Right. And so I'm kind of here and there and all over the place.
Get to crawl under houses.
Yeah, fun stories about that another time, though. Yeah, we'll talk about those another time.
That's right. Well, we call this the Big Three. So what we're going to do, all 3 of us are going to do a couple of things. First, I want each of you to share a time of waiting that stands in your mind. Because, the sermon today was a lot about waiting. And I think for a lot of people, that's really connecting to them. So, Mike, you start first. What's a time of waiting?
So one of the big things that I thought about for waiting was back when we started the 2020 vision, back in 2013, when we first started it all. We talked a lot about this, about waiting, and then the things that we did in there was prayer. So I remember every day we had this, for weeks we had these prayers where we would come to the building at, I think it was sometimes at 6 in the morning, and we would have prayer sessions. And sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 people here, and sometimes there'd be 70 people here. And those were a big deal back then, and it still weighs on my mind.
Yeah, obviously, you still think about it. What about you, Blake?
A time of waiting for me, firstborn son. Okay, lots going through my mind. I'm not that old, 28 years old, and I just remember, and I was talking to your husband about this a lot, at a time of waiting was like building that connection between father and son when I didn't feel it at first, since I didn't feel the baby, you know what I mean? So there was a period of waiting there where it was like, what in the world am I getting myself into, kind of thing. And so it was multiple times spent in, multiple hours spent in prayer. What is this going to be like? Am I prepared? And the answer is no, and everyone was telling me that.
Right.
But that's kind of the norm. So, but yeah, that was a big period of waiting. It's like, I know the deadline, right? We got 9 months, but I'm just like, these last 3 months feel like forever. So.
Right. Oh yeah, it was a big thing. Yeah, mine is also kid related. A lot of people know our youngest son is adopted, and it took us a year to get matched. We felt like we were being obedient to a call, and then it wasn't easy. And so it took us a year to get matched. It took us 4 years to bring him home, and now he's here, and he's taller than everybody, and he's such a blessing to us. But during that time, there was a lot of doubting, did God really want us to do this? And so we had to remain in prayer. And so it was a hard time. So anybody who's like in a waiting room right now, my heart goes out to you, because I know it is really difficult. There's a lot going on. Okay, so now I want each of us to share a highlight from the sermon, something that really stood out to you. I mean, I think you and all 3 of us talked about, we could talk about so many things, but narrow down. Mike, what's your biggest one?
So like we kind of already talked about already, but he talked about how the disciples had to go back to Jerusalem and wait, but they didn't just wait; they had to be active in doing something. And for them, it was prayer. They focused on prayer, and they prayed and prayed and prayed, and that was what we called the term he used was active waiting, I think.
Yes.
So for their prayers, just over and over and over. So that was part of that really stood out in my mind.
For sure.
Oh,
for
so
sure.
good. What about you, Blake?
For me, Kelvin used the word in between.
Yeah.
The waiting in between times, and that hit home for me. We can talk more stories about that, but the in between period can look differently for so many people, and you can respond differently in many different ways. Connected to that in between time, he also talked about power. So if you want power, basically give it up. To give up
upside
yourself.
down. That's another upside down thing, right?
Exactly. So what does that in between look like? Well, the selfish part of me wants to take control and take the power, put it in my hands, and stop the waiting and act, really. But the power comes as a predecessor to, King Jesus. Like, that's part of it is giving ourselves up.
Yeah, and that doesn't make sense to the world. That's just,
No.
Another example of how this is, the opposite of what the world would think. The thing that I wrote down was that the apostles were devoted to prayer while they were waiting for the Holy Spirit, and they did that together. They were all in a room together. I love that Jesus' mom was there and brothers and like these collection of people who, over those 3 years of his ministry, how they were all there together. Jesus said, go back to Jerusalem and wait. Something's coming that I've promised you. And so they all do it, but they don't all do it separately in all these different places.
Right.
They did it together. And so I think, we highlight on here community. We highlight that a lot. And so if you're a person who joins us online regularly because you live somewhere else, because we've got people from all over, know that we want to be in that waiting room with you. We want to be a part of your community because I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not physical. Sometimes it's we're with you spiritually, there's other people fighting. I love the names that he mentions because while you can just read through them, you forget Jesus, like Mary just saw her son die on a cross. You know what I mean? So there's weight to that, right? And she's there surrounded by people. And, I knew that she was in the upper room with them, but I just didn't put those two together. Like, my goodness, what did she just go through?
Right.
And now she's surrounded by friends and family.
People who need to be there.
Exactly.
People who understand it better than anybody else.
Right.
That's really beautiful. Thanks for joining us, and this is so good. Well, don't leave yet. We still got more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so if you have more questions, you can use the QR code on the screen.
Yes, and if you want to rewatch this sermon or watch it for the first time, you can find it at boulevard.to/sermons.
Well, that wraps up this week's Big Three. Blake, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And thanks to everyone for being with us. Look for this podcast on your favorite platforms and be sure to join us next week for Boulevard's Big Three.